Right, let's have a quick look at some of the things we can do regarding emissions and particles. Basically this setting here, particle emission intensity. What I've done, I've basically set up a pretty simple standard emitter. I've given it a TFD tag, and I'm giving it a value density quite large just for the hell of it. And if we run the default sim of that, it's not surprising. We're basically getting emission from our particles which are dying. By the way, they've got a lifetime of 100, so when they die off, then they're no longer emitting. And I've got everything on its default apart from obviously setting up density, but the density is actually set to dissipate, so hence we're getting these different colours. They're dissipating, so that's how it is out of the box. Now the fun things to play with are on the emitter tag, particle emission intensity, and a good example would be age. Okay, so what we're saying here is that as things start off at age 0, they're emitting nothing, and at their end of their lifetime, their age, they get to a maximum emission. So what we'll see is, if we sim this now, we're getting virtually nothing emitted until they get near to the end of their age. Now this has to be obviously, if we put this right over here, we're going to get a more obvious. See, nothing's happening until they reach a certain age. I can't tell you the exact relationship here. It's a question again of playing around and seeing what rocks your boat. Let's try it at that level. Okay, let's bring it back to a more reasonable level, say about here. And what we can do to even add a bit more interest, we can actually go into here and add velocity weight. Okay, now we're not caching velocity, but we can actually use velocity weight of these particles even though we don't cache velocity. In other words, let's put this up to a value of 10, and what this is doing is it's saying that the actual speed of the particle, the movement of the particle, is going to affect the actual fluids. So whereas before we had nice straight line fluids, we're going to get something completely different now, and we get these explosive plumes, almost like sort of sound barriers being burst, or I don't know, they're like whatever you want them to be, like jellyfish. Now we can set this on various settings. If we take our velocity weight off, let's stop that and go back to our default. We could actually have this on velocity. Now I'm not sure if it picks up velocity without caching velocity, so we shall see. But it would be a good idea to have a variation in the velocity of, let's say, 100%. Why not? Let's see what we get here. Now although you can't see it here very clearly, but there is a difference regarding various particles, and what the difference is that those moving faster, I believe it's those moving faster are giving off more density than those moving slower. It's not that easy to see, but again, something to play around with and experiment with. I think the idea of this, one reason I think you could want to use this with the standard emitters certainly, was if you have, let's say you've got debris coming out of an explosion, and you could set it using this concept of velocity. You could set it such that when the debris hits the ground and actually stops, in in other words slows down, you can then tell it to start emitting, as opposed to emitting all the time it's flying through the air. So in other words, it might sort of give the impression of giving a sort of a woof of dust coming off from the ground. Or likewise, if it was fire, while they're flying through the air, you probably wouldn't want too much flame coming out of them, but as they hit the ground and then settle on the ground, then you'd want the burn and the flame to come on, and you could affect that with, say, fuel, and base it on velocity. Again, you've got velocity, mass, size, and what have you, so experiment to your heart content with all of those. Again, I'm not sure if you need to cache velocity for that. Let's just see what happens if we cache velocity, whether we get anything particularly different. It's difficult to tell until you actually do a render. And to be honest with you, I haven't been using, there are differences here. I'm not sure which way it's working, whether it's the faster ones get more or the slower ones. Again, you'd have to experiment to see. If we put it down that way, we'll see what happens then. Everything's getting nothing. And if we bring this one up, still not getting anything from that. Let's try there. Still not liking it. Let's try up there. Yeah, those kick in quite quickly, and I think if we were to move this right over here, we'd find a bigger difference. Again, something, to be honest with you, I haven't really played around with much myself. I haven't had much call to use it. So it's something you need to experiment with, but it's there, and the feature's there. And as we saw earlier, if we actually put this velocity weight up, we also get some quite interesting effects. In fact, I think those are very interesting. Let's see what they look like when they render out. Oh, they're very nice. I shall play with them some more. That's quite a fun little thing. Okay, right, well that's covered that. Again, something you really need to play with, which suits your particular project. I would suggest caching velocity if you're going to be dealing with velocity. It's a useful thing to cache. If you can, if you've got the time, if it's not too heavy a sim, I would always suggest caching velocity. The times when I wouldn't cache velocity is if I'm working on something and I'm getting very heavy memory usage, because velocity does bump up your memory usage and does bump up the size of your cache, and also slows down your calculations. But for something like this, when it's actually such a low res, it really doesn't make a lot of difference. And it means we could even go in now and up-res this and do a few other things. But, quite pleased with the look of those. Okay, well, we'll leave it there.